On the night of February 9, 1864, one of the most daring and infamous prison breaks in American history took place. An event that would mark a pivotal moment in the American Civil War. Libby Prison was the site of an escape that would not only stun the nation, but also change the course of countless lives forever. But what made this escape so remarkable? How did a group of Union prisoners pull off what was considered the largest successful prison break of the Civil War? And most importantly, what does this daring escape reveal about the resilience and ingenuity of those held captive? Libby Prison, a former tobacco warehouse in Richmond, Virginia, became one of the most feared Confederate prisons during the Civil War. Overcrowded and filled with disease, the conditions were unbearable for Union soldiers held captive. By the winter of 1864, Libby was overcrowded with more than 1,000 Union soldiers. They lived in deplorable conditions, crammed into tiny spaces with little food, inadequate clothing, and limited medical supplies. Disease spread rapidly, and death was a constant companion. Despite the harsh conditions, a group of determined Union officers refused to lose hope. They quietly observed the prison's layout, studied the guards' routines, and identified weaknesses in the prison structure. These men were planning something daring: their escape. The American Civil War was one of the deadliest conflicts in U.S. history, claiming over 600,000 lives in just 4 years. Surprisingly, twice as many soldiers died from disease as from battle wounds. Poor sanitation, primitive medical care, and terrible conditions in prisons helped spread illnesses rapidly. This brutal war for America centered around slavery. It's estimated that 620,000 soldiers died between 1861 and 1865. Over 400,000 Union and Confederate soldiers were captured and held as prisoners of war in about 150 different prison camps across the country. Initially, the Civil War would be over quickly, but the conflict dragged on, fueled by the determination of both the North and the South. Thousands of young men from places like Michigan, Ohio, and New England answered the call to fight, heading into parts of the country they had never seen before. The sheer number of soldiers killed and captured overwhelmed both armies. After the First Battle of Manassas in July 1861, more than 1,300 Union soldiers were captured. Officers were sent to Libby Prison, while enlisted men were taken to a nearby island prison. Libby Prison, constructed between 1845 and 1852 in Richmond, Virginia. It was designed by architect Alexander Paris and operated by John Enders. When the Civil War broke out, the Confederate government quickly converted a large facility into a military prison to house the growing number of captured Union soldiers. The shift from a commercial enterprise to a notorious prison marked a turning point in its history. The prison complex consisted of 3 interconnected buildings that spanned an entire city block, strategically positioned for better control and surveillance of the inmates. The upper floors were crowded with Union officers, while the first floor was occupied by Confederate guards, maintaining a strict watch. The prison was designed specifically for officers, while enlisted men sent to other facilities. Libby Prison was notorious for its horrendous conditions. The building had almost no ventilation, and the floors were filthy with waste. Prisoners were crammed together so tightly they could barely move. With no proper medical care, diseases spread quickly. Food was scarce, and any attempt to communicate with the outside world was harshly punished. The situation was so dire that even the families were unable to send even basic necessities to their loved ones incarcerated there. The building was initially designed to hold a few hundred officers, but by late 1863, the population had surged to over 1,000 inmates. On November 28, 1863, the New York Times published a story headlined "Horrors of Richmond Prisons" that contained a statement released by a group of surgeons who, until recently, had been confined at the prison. The prevailing diseases at Libby are diarrhea, dysentery, and typhoid pneumonia, they reported. Of late, the percentage of deaths has greatly increased, the result of causes that have been long at work such as insufficient food, clothing and shelter, combined with that depression of spirits brought on so often by long confinement. After the Union soldiers were captured at the Battle of Chickamauga, many were sent to the notorious Libby Prison. Among them was Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Rose, a Union officer from the 77th Pennsylvania Voluntary Infantry and a former schoolteacher from Pennsylvania. Rose, haunted by the loss of his regimental colors, was enraged by the harsh conditions and determined to escape. Rose's resolve was evident even before he reached Libby. On the way, he made an escape attempt. On my way thither, I escaped at Weldon, North Carolina, and after wandering about for a day, I was recaptured by some rebel cavalry that came upon me accidentally. I was suffering at the time from a broken foot, which caused me to be slow in reaching a place of concealment. Once at Libby, escape became Rose's sole focus, despite a recently foiled attempt by other prisoners. His initial plans failed, a revolt fell apart, and 2 attempts to sneak past guards ended in capture. Undeterred, Rose devised a bold new strategy, digging a tunnel out of the prison. He teamed up with Major Andrew G. Hamilton, a home builder from Kentucky who shared his determination to escape. Rose wasn't the highest-ranking officer in the prison, so he knew he wouldn't be part of a prisoner exchange. Instead, he studied the layout of the prison and realized its proximity to the James River meant a sewer system could provide an escape route. Hamilton became an invaluable ally. He helped plan the tunnel, recruit other prisoners, and kept morale high. The 2 men found a hidden spot behind a kitchen stove where they could dig into a basement undetected. Hamilton's experience as a builder proved crucial, as he made precise calculations to ensure the tunnel would lead to freedom. Captured at Chickamauga like Rose, Hamilton's resolve was only strengthened by Libby's appalling conditions. Together, the 2 men inspired their fellow prisoners to persevere, turning their escape plan into a shared mission of hope. The basement, known to everyone as Rat Hell, was a filthy, straw-covered space filled with rats and other pests. The conditions were disgusting, but they worked to the men's advantage. The guards avoided the basement because it was so unpleasant, making it the perfect place to hide their escape plan. Colonel Thomas E. Rose, Major A.G. Hamilton, and a small group of determined prisoners came up with the idea to dig a tunnel and escape from Libby Prison. Despite the risks and lack of proper tools, they were desperate for freedom. The conditions in the prison were horrendous, and the guards were becoming more vigilant. Yet, the idea of digging a tunnel consumed the prisoners' every thought. The men faced overwhelming logistics. They had no map to guide them, no tools suited for the job, and very little oxygen underground. The conditions were filthy, with mud, muck, and rats everywhere. They had to be creative, using spoons, knives, and a broken shovel to dig. After digging, the dirt had to be disposed of secretly, or the guards would become suspicious. Initially, the prisoners dug a short tunnel that led outside the prison grounds. However, this tunnel proved useless as it only led to an open area that was patrolled day and night. Rose cautiously poked his head above ground but saw a guard and quickly retreated. The guards mistook him for a civilian contractor, which spared him from punishment, but this failure showed them that tunneling out was possible. They decided to try again with a second tunnel, but that too failed. The guards were becoming more alert, and there was a growing concern that someone would betray the plan. By this time, about 400 prisoners knew about the escape attempt, and Rose and Hamilton feared the plan would fall apart if even one person broke their silence. Undeterred, Rose and Hamilton revised their strategy. This time, they decided to dig from behind the kitchen fireplace into an east cellar of the basement, out of the guards' view. It took 11 grueling nights to scrape away the bricks of the fireplace and create a narrow chute leading into the east cellar. Rose became the lead tunneler, with a rope tied to his ankles so Hamilton could pull him out if he became too exhausted or suffocated. Working underground was terrifying. The conditions were suffocating, and without proper tools, progress was slow. Men worked in shifts from 9 p.m. to 4 a.m., digging away the earth while others stood guard. They used a spittoon to carry out the dirt, and a man would fan air into the tunnel entrance using a hat to keep the air from becoming stale. But the second tunnel, too, failed. The angle was too steep, and the water flooded in. Another attempt resulted in the tunnel sloping upward and collapsing under the weight of a brick furnace. Fortunately, the guards assumed the collapse was caused by rats digging through the soil. By early 1864, Rose and Hamilton were running out of time. Rumors spread that Confederate forces were planning to move 13,000 prisoners further south, which made escape even more urgent. The Union Army was closing in on Richmond, and the Confederates feared an attack on their capital. The prisoners knew that if they were moved, escape would become even more difficult, and the journey back to Union lines would be longer and more dangerous. This news reignited the prisoners' determination. Rose declared, "We made fairly rapid progress. One night, I dug 6 feet with my own hands. My whole party was divided into reliefs of 5 men each, so that the same men went down to work every third night." The final tunnel was their last hope. It was planned to stretch over 50 feet from the basement to an abandoned lot outside the prison. The men dug through compacted sand, which made progress slightly easier, but also riskier. There was no timber to support the tunnel walls, so they worked in a narrow passage that was only 2 feet wide and 18 inches high. The men couldn't even turn around in the tunnel, and anyone who got stuck had to either wiggle free or call for help to be pulled out by the ankles. The work was grueling and dangerous. Some men fainted from exhaustion or lack of oxygen and had to be dragged out. Cold winter winds of January and February 1864 made life in the prison even harder, leaving the emaciated men shivering with no proper clothing or food. But despite these challenges, the tunnel steadily grew longer, and so did their hope for freedom. The team continued digging, and under the leadership of Rose and Hamilton, the men worked tirelessly. Their tunnel, which was just 24 inches by 18 inches by 16 inches at its narrowest point, was their final chance. The work was slow, and each inch of progress was hard-earned. The frozen ground made the digging even more difficult, but the prisoners remained focused on their goal. After 53 days of digging, they finished the 4th tunnel. But when Rose emerged from the tunnel, he found that it was just short of the prison fence. Devastated, he plugged up the next exit and the team kept digging, determined not to give up. They knew this tunnel would be their last chance, and they were willing to do whatever it took to break free. Through sheer willpower and teamwork, the prisoners managed to complete the tunnel that would lead them to freedom. The tunnel was 50 to 60 feet in length. The Great Escape Plan was about to become a reality, and they knew that the risks were high, but their hope for freedom was even higher. On the night of February 9, 1864, after months of digging and planning, the escape from Libby Prison was set to unfold. Colonel Thomas E. Rose and his fellow prisoners had worked tirelessly for 17 days, digging a secret tunnel beneath the prison. The tunnel led from the prison cellar to the tobacco shed of a warehouse lot across the street. The plan was simple but dangerous. Once the night watchman extinguished the lights, the escapees would move the stove aside to reveal the tunnel entrance. One by one, they would crawl through the narrow passage and emerge into the warehouse yard and Canal Street, then scatter heading north to reach Union lines. The excitement was palpable as the men stationed on the upper floors of the East Wing watched their comrades make their move. Fugitives pop out of the tunnel, cross the yard, clear the gateway to the street, turn left, and then disappear, one inmate recalled. The escape began around 10 p.m., and for over 5 hours, a steady stream of men crawled out of the tunnel, making their escape to freedom. By the time it was over, 109 men had slipped out of the prison undetected, including 21 majors and colonels, 35 captains, and 53 lieutenants. Once outside, the escapees quickly split into smaller groups, each with different routes for evasion. Some aimed from Williamsburg, 100 miles southeast, where Union forces under General Benjamin Butler were stationed, while others sought refuge with Elizabeth Van Lew, a Union spy who aided escaped prisoners in Richmond. Meanwhile, Colonel Rose, one of the key leaders of the escape, took charge and helped direct the officers to safety. The men had to navigate Richmond cautiously, blending in with pedestrians to avoid drawing attention. As they walked out into the streets, many had close calls with Confederate soldiers, narrowly avoiding detection. By approximately 3:30 a.m., once all had exited, they re-bricked the entrance to conceal the tunnel from discovery. The next morning, February 10th, the prison officials realized that many prisoners were missing during roll call. In a mix of disbelief and defiance, The remaining inmates cheekily replied, "They fell out the window," covering for their comrades' daring escape. The Confederate forces soon realized the extent of the breach and launched a manhunt, searching the area around Richmond and the countryside. Despite the Confederate efforts, many escapees were determined to evade capture, though their journey was hampered by their weakened physical condition. Malnourished, disease-ridden, and poorly clothed for the harsh winter weather, they faced significant challenges. But their hope for freedom kept them moving forward. They received resistance from local sympathizers, including Van Leeuw's network, which proved crucial for many in reaching Union lines. Of the 109 men who attempted the escape, 59 made it to Union lines. Tragically, 2 men drowned while crossing the Chickahominy River, and 48 were recaptured. Among the recaptured was Colonel Rose, who made significant progress toward Union lines but was ambushed and captured just minutes from safety by Confederate pickets. After his recapture, Rose was taken back to Libby Prison, where he was placed in solitary confinement, facing brutal punishment. However, his resolve remained strong, and after some time, he was exchanged for a Confederate colonel on April 30th, 1864. He rejoined his unit, the 77th Pennsylvania Infantry, and continued to serve bravely until the end of the Civil War. The escape, while partially unsuccessful, became a symbol of courage and determination. The men who made it safely eventually reached Washington, D.C., where they shared their harrowing stories, which became a testament to their endurance and the inhumane conditions at Libby Prison. Their successful escape and the confusion it caused among the Confederate forces highlighted the vulnerability of even the most secure prisons and the resilience of those determined to gain their freedom. The escape from Libby Prison is one of the most daring prison breaks in American history. Against all odds, Union prisoners showcased remarkable ingenuity and determination to break free, offering a symbol of hope to those suffering in captivity. While it didn't end the Civil War, it proved that even in the darkest times, freedom is worth fighting for, and the human will to survive remains unbreakable. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to Breakout Bank for more videos.